Welcome to the Jessica Koulianos Podcast. Welcome back. We are just going to jump right into part 2. We were talking about loyalty, friendship, and ministry, all of that fun stuff. And when we left off, Steph, I was talking about my son, Theo, my honest son, Theo. And he was just watching just ministry life play out, friendships and ministry play out. My dream is that my kids will carry on this work one day. That's the dream of my heart. The Lord knows that. And I didn't want to be in ministry whenever because of what I saw in how people acted. That was really what got me. It really wasn't, I often think back, like, why did I run so hard from the church? And I love the church. The church is God's bride, so I don't like it. I don't like to attack the church, but when I think about why I ran so hard, it was the people that I saw how my family was treated.
Right.
And they weren't perfect. My parents weren't perfect, but I saw just the betrayal.
Right.
I saw the competition in ministry. I saw just the slander, the attack. I saw how tired my dad was and my mom. I saw how much they gave.
Yeah.
And you know, because your daddy was in full-time ministry and your mom. And so, and we could do a whole nother podcast on that alone, Steph, just like, just what the cost of being in a ministry family, because it's very costly.
Right.
But when I saw all that, I was like, I don't want anything. If this is what church is like, I don't want anything to do with it. Too immature to understand that Jesus was nothing like that, because I was just immature and foolish at the time. But when here my son is saying these words, I thought, no, baby, you need to not do what I did, and you don't need to push the church away because people can be flawed.
Right.
And you don't need to be that kind of friend if you feel like friends are treating you wrong. You always be a loyal, intentional friend. Right. And that's something I've really taught my kids. But I do want to hit that a little bit, just the behind the scenes a little bit, like how we can be loyal, committed, faithful friends to one another. Like one story for me comes to mind, and I'm sure you have many, and I'd love to hear them, is when my dad was in the hospital.
Yes.
He had a heart issue, and it was pretty bad. We don't talk about it a lot, but he was 24 hours from being dead. I got him to the hospital. That was not easy because he's very stubborn, but I knew something was wrong. And the doctor said, if you didn't get him here when you did, we would have lost him. So everything was shutting down, his organs. We were in the ICU for a week. Very scary. And I remember so many people called, so many people reached out, a lot of people posted, pray for Benny Hinn, all sweet.
Yeah.
All meaningful. It does mean something to you. But there were 2 people, Steph, 2, out of all the friends my dad had through the years, all the people he'd been there for, all the people that he had gotten behind and walked with deeply, 2 jumped on an airplane to come visit their friend. Yeah. One was a former associate pastor of his, and the other was Reinhardt Bunky. Which I'll get emotional when I think about that too much, because Reinhardt, what a friend he was. What a friend. And they were in ministry at the same time, different, of course, in their own ways, but they were really in the charismatic movement coming up together. Yes. And I remember watching their friendship as a child, and they really did love each other. So much so, my dad, whenever he would go to Africa, he would call Reinhardt to go, do I have your blessing? This is the region the Lord has really blessed you with.
Special and
when
important.
Reinhardt came once to America, before he was doing his crusades here, he reached out to my dad. Benny, I want to bring you in on this. And they brought each other in a lot of stuff. But I remember when my dad was here dying, and Reinhardt had preached, I believe, late into the night before. I hope I'm getting the details right. I'd have to go back and ask Michael. I'm pretty sure he took a red eye. I know he flew through the night and came right to the hospital with his Bible in hand.
Of course.
And started tucking my dad in, like making sure his feet weren't cold, and just sat with him and prayed for him and prophesied over him. And I remember that marked me, Steph, in such a great way. Of course, I was scared, and seeing Reinhardt brought me peace. You could feel the Lord come into the room when he came in. But I thought, what a friend. Like, this is what a real friend looks like.
Yes.
And you remember those things. You remember when you're down and out. Like Reinhardt really showed he cared.
Yes.
And that has marked me forever. And I remember thinking, I want to be that kind of friend that Reinhardt was to my dad.
Yes.
To drop everything. And if a friend needs me, I'm there. And it doesn't matter if no one ever knows about that.
That's right.
Like, I tell this story now, but like Reinhardt didn't go and do a photo op or go talk about how he dropped everying and
Didn't
jumped
tell
on a
the story.
plane. He didn't know.
You get to tell that
I
story.
get to tell it, and I'm happy to because I think more people need to know these kind of stories. But I remember not only did we need the faith of a friend of God in the room in that moment, but I remember I was like, we loved him forever. It only like made their connection deeper with my dad and him and the family, because it's like he really has been there in good times and bad. And I wish more people would be more intentional. You're getting emotional. Why? I'd love to hear what's in your heart.
You would never ask me to share this, but when you were talking about Bunky and your dad, I just thought about, you jumping on a plane when my dad passed.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, in the fullness of all that, I'm not running a ministry. That's not where I am in my life, but I'm a minister, but I'm not like shepherding a whole, movement of people and a whole house and school and all of that. But I think because you knew the Lord had given us to you as friends, and you were like, what can I do? How can I be there? And you got on a plane and came to a tiny little country town.
I loved it.
In a tiny little farmhouse. And when you didn't know what to do, you'd just pray and clean. You'd just like tidy stuff up and run a vacuum and play with wonder. And and then Michael drove up with the kids. Like I'll never forget that as long as I live. Wow. And I know heaven won't.
It was an honor, Steph.
And I feel that that's true from you. I've always felt that. But I will say, like, it marks you forever when someone loves you that way.
It does.
And once you've experienced it, you're like, one, it convicts you of being a better friend, but two, it's just like, oh, how great the love of Jesus.
That's exactly what you feel.
The loyalty of Jesus.
The loyalty of Jesus. Yeah. It like when Reinhardt came in that hospital room, of course it made me love him more, but it made me aware of Jesus more.
And that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
The Lord presses in how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together in unity and praise the Lord.
Yeah.
A word says that.
Yeah.
It's where he commands the blessing.
Yes.
The word like when unity comes, when we'll actually walk with, it's not just agreement. It's like unity. And it's impossible for us to all be as close. He sends us a few close ones that we get to walk
deeper
with.
Than others. Yeah, absolutely.
You can't walk that closely with everyone.
Everybody.
The Lord's not asking that of us. But when you know he's given those people to you, there is a way to walk it out.
Yeah.
And in some seasons, some can give a certain way, and in other seasons they can't.
Yeah.
But it's about being present to give whatever the Lord is asking, whatever would bring strength and bring the Lord glory.
Yeah.
However that relationship could reflect him. And if the fruit is not Jesus, if the foundation is not Jesus, then the fruit won't be Jesus.
It's true.
And when the fruit is those things and you walk away going, not just did Michael and Jess and the kids come to be with me in like one of the greatest sorrows of my life, but I felt heaven present because the Lord had been faithful to me to give me people who were as faithful as my dad was. I felt very given away by him and covered by him, that the Lord, it's like the Lord secured these friendships before my dad passed on, because my dad was one of my very best friends. Yeah. I know you know what that's like. Yeah. But I watched him, Lord. I watched like people. Yeah. I remember being a teenager, and I remember these like, I went to a Christian school.
So did I.
That's all I'll say. That's a different podcast.
Yeah, that's totally different.
And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for what the Lord did there. But Christian schools are a whole thing.
Yep.
And the Lord, like, man, my dad was a really humble man. And there were people who didn't think that he should have the position he had. And And they felt like they were the ones who were supposed to have
yeah.
it. And so they did everything they could to break apart how he was leading or whatever.
That's how division typically comes in.
And that's how it happens.
You don't deserve that spot. I do. That's typically the root of it all.
So much self. So he, I remember being at a basketball game with the Christian school, which was connected to the church, but not entirely. But I mean, this is a full gymnasium.
Yeah.
I was either playing basketball or cheering something. And I watch, the bleachers are full. There's people, there's a game going on. And I watch this man get up out of this whole crew of people who have had a lot of really terrible things to say about my dad, none of which are true.
Yeah.
And wanted to be, they wanted to be in that position. They weren't stoked. They were there before he came, and they didn't like that he got brought into the position. And I watched them rip him to shreds in front of all these people. I mean, at the top of his lungs, in front of all my friends, in front of all these people. And I watched my dad just take a deep breath and fold his hands and just listen. Didn't say a word, bit his tongue.
Wow.
And he knew very well what all these people might be thinking because they're hearing what this guy is saying. And I'm looking at my dad going, say something. Why don't you stand up for that's not true. I'm getting upset. But I watched his loyalty to Jesus. And even, just like Jesus, keep his mouth shut when he could have defended himself.
Yep.
And I watched his loyalty and the friends that he walked with through the years and the ones who didn't do things like that, but the ones who just quietly, that would call, they'd pray together. The ones who still message me.
I love that.
We've been praying for you.
Yeah.
Here's what we feel like after all these years.
Yeah.
Who love my dad, who are not looking for screen time.
Yeah.
They're not looking for me to post about the word they gave me.
Yeah.
They're just faithful and loyal. And they've been faithful and loyal to me even after my dad's passing.
Wouldn't you say that people that are faithful and loyal, there's not a lot of self in the way? Because I feel like when there's a lot of selfish ambition and desires, it's really hard to be a loyal and a faithful person just in general. It's just not who you are. And I typically have found that people that have a hard time being loyal and intentional are people that really there's a lot of selfishness in them. I've had my moments where
we all have.
We all do. That's not a judgment. I've had my moments where I want to be seen.
We can't not say that.
Yeah, and I'm like, Jesse, you're being selfish right now. There's selfishness there. But that's when I go back to Jesus and go, take that out, take the self out, take this desire to be known and seen, take that out, because we all can have that in us, but
it's our nature without Jesus.
Absolutely.
It's who we all are.
It's who we are. It's
without
how
the work
we're
of
designed
the cross.
Without the cross.
Constantly.
Exactly. But when you cling to the cross, it does make you different. And I might hit that on one of these podcasts, but just talking about the joy and suffering too, because that's a whole nother topic that I think is so beautiful. There is a beauty in suffering for Jesus. Or being misunderstood or whatever it is.
It's all in the cup.
It's all
the joy and the suffering.
Exactly. But I love how you talked about your dad would just, and I only met him a couple times, Steph.
I know.
And exactly how you describe him is how I experienced him. Just so faithful, so loyal, so real, so intentional. He was the kind of guy that would come right up to your face and just look you right in the eye. Yeah. And talk to you, and you knew. I remember even with Michael. Oh yeah, he saw right through me. I was like, wow. I feel like you know everything about me. But I remember even Michael and I were going through ministries this year. Always going through something. I feel like we were going through something years ago, and Michael called your dad, and he just sat on the phone with him for I felt like hours, and just listened and really cared. And again, that's why I want to hit that. That's not being a selfish person. That's living a selfless life to really care for one another. And I feel like if the church staff could figure that out, if we could get, of course, we got to love Jesus with all of our heart and get that right. That's the first thing.
It all comes from there.
Yeah. But if we could actually really love one another and really care for each other and actually be sincere, let our yes mean yes, our no mean no, really prefer each other, I feel like the devil wouldn't stand a chance.
No. Think about when you're saying that. I keep thinking about a mother who's, when you're raising a son, I'm very new in raising a son, but I've thought about even what my parents have said to the way that you raise a son to look for, no good man is attracted to a woman who is jealous of other girls.
That's so true.
Who does not know that she's beautiful.
Yep.
Who
Insecure.
who's insecure, who's always kind of like jealous in the wrong, strife.
Causing little
because they're
things.
like, that'll cause you trouble down the road, buddy.
Yeah.
And I think about Jesus is looking for a bride.
Yeah.
He's looking for a bride.
Yes.
That knows who she is because of who he is.
Exactly.
Because they've focused on who he is. We've not gone on this journey of like focusing on ourselves. We're focusing on Jesus. And in that we become who we're meant to be. The identity falls into place when we're looking at Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think he's coming back for a bride that's not looking for strife. That's not just,
who wants the drama?
It's
like
who
wants the drama?
The
Life is crazy
drama.
enough. Yeah. Like what?
Yes.
Why do we need more drama?
All the insecurity and the need to like even getting close to someone so you can say that you know. To say you have someone's information, you just like you knew something first, or little bits of self that's all that little bit of self that sneaks in that you just oh man, it has to be. There's we've adopted so much of the self-talk stuff into the church, like that it's really affected how we do relationship because we've brought in the wisdom of the world to do.
Ministry relationship
and marriage and family, everything. We've brought in the wisdom of the world to try to lead us, but we use the language of the kingdom, and it's made us sick.
Yeah,
and
they're at war with one another.
You
can't do the ways of the world and bring it
wisdom,
into
It doesn't.
They're never
going to
mix.
No, they won't. But we sure have tried.
We sure have.
And it's hurt us. And so we have to get back to the wisdom of the word.
Yeah.
And the way that Jesus did relationships instead of, and don't get me wrong, I think that Lord gives special gifts and insight and teaching to people about relationships. I mean, good grief, what would any of us do without Danny Silk?
Oh,
thank God for
we
Danny
were just
Silk.
with them a week ago for a team retreat.
Right?
It was wonderful.
It's not diminishing. Those are like people who have faithfully stewarded.
Yeah.
Right? That's a different, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the wisdom of the world.
Yes.
Being received in exchange. We've given away the ways of the word that actually teach us how to do a much more intentional and costly relationship and covenant.
That's a lot when you read about Jesus and his disciples. And you know what, the passage I love so much, Steph, and I share it a lot when I minister because it's always just gotten to me, is when Jesus tells all of his followers, we always think about the 12, but there was so many other ones that were following Jesus, and he says, eat my body, drink my blood. And that just was too offensive for them. And remember when the disciple says, you've offended them, and then Jesus just turns it up a notch. I love that about the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, they're offended?
Like,
okay, I'm going to just even go like harder. But so many desert him right then and there.
Yes.
And then he looks at the 12, which is such a vulnerable thing to ask. And he says, are you going to leave me too?
Yes.
And I always think about that. Like, what must that have felt like for Jesus?
Yes.
Because typically when people leave you and walk out on you, typically the last thing you do is want to go open up your heart even more to those around you, because typically we put up a wall and boundaries to protect ourselves from feeling hurt again. But Jesus, he changes everything. And he doesn't do that at all. Now he shows his vulnerability to his followers and says, are you also going to leave me? What was he looking there? What was he looking for? Loyalty, commitment, love. That's what he was wanting from them in that moment. Like, will you be here? Because they all just walked out on me. And yes, he's fully God, but he was also fully man. To identify with us. So we know that must have broken his heart, that so many people walked out on him like this. And then he leans in on those so close to him. And even when thinking about when Judas is about to betray him and how John is right there, leans on his chest. And then the thing that I also think about when I think about that whole Judas piece is that Jesus covered Judas so well that the disciples didn't even know
I think about that too.
Who was the one that he was talking about.
But he knew all along.
And it mattered so much to him, Steph, that he wanted to bring it to all those that he loved so much and
Yes.
be so vulnerable. And I think
Yes.
that's something that we need to get back to in ministry is transparency
Yes.
with one another.
Yes.
Being vulnerable with one another.
Instead of always trying to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Or
Yes. Like not having to put up a wall, like
Yes, a
actually
wall.
saying, I'm having a bad day.
Right.
My heart is broken.
Right.
You did hurt me when you said this about me. You did hurt me
Right.
when you did this. Because this is what Jesus did, which, I mean, coming out of my mouth, that's a miracle because I could be the complete opposite by nature.
and I'm like, I would quickly
Yeah.
move on. I would be much quicker to like
Yeah.
forgive and let it go.
Yeah.
But and never tell you that it hurt me.
See, I'm the exact opposite. Again, I'm Steven and you're Michael.
Thankful for friendship.
yes.
Thankful for what you bring. And
Yeah.
But that's part of it. Like it is
Yeah.
crazy that it goes. That's just our tendency.
Yeah, but when Jesus
without.
is the model, I know for me,
Yeah.
like when I'm like, if this is how Jesus would do it, it's not about what would Jessica do. What is
Right.
Jessica's default? Because Jessica would do something of the flesh.
Sure.
But Jesus always kept his heart open, but he did expect his friends and all of his followers to be faithful and loyal to him. And again, if he's the goal, if he's what we're wanting to look like, and if he wants us to love each other,
worthy
we need to be faithful and loyal to one another. Not just run out on each other's lives or not have communication. That's all these things are very unhealthy for
Yeah.
true fellowship. There actually should be a connection. And it's something I pray for the body of Christ, even like, and this is probably going to have to be a whole nother topic one day, but just even like how to really prefer one another in leadership, in ministry. But I think that's how friends in ministry can have longevity. That means if tomorrow you're hated by everybody, which I don't see that ever happening because everyone loves you. But like
With me.
sometimes I think of things like that, and I realized that with my own family, when my dad and mom walked through just really rough seasons, it was amazing to me how many people didn't want to be our friend anymore. But now that there's controversy and stuff surrounding our life, now that we're going through something as a family, I was like, what? I thought we were real friends. And I remember one time, Steph, and I appreciate the honesty, actually. Michael, again, not growing up in this, just didn't read the memo. I knew what was going to happen. I was like, we're a liability now. No one's going to want to be our friend. And, they did reconcile, thank the Lord. I knew because we would call friends and no return calls, friends that we would talk to all the time. And there was one friend, Michael kept calling, and Michael's like, he never answers my call anymore. I go, babe, he doesn't want to be your friend anymore because you're connected to my dad. And right now that's really taboo. He's like, no, he wouldn't do that. That's not how friends are. And I was like, Michael,
He couldn't imagine it.
Like it was so, it just was so
he's not like
foreign
that
to
at
him
all.
because he's not like that at all. And he's like, oh no, he would never do this. This is one of my closest friends. And I'm like, babe, I promise you, you're a risk now because you're connected to my family and they're going through a dark season. And finally, just after like many calls, because Michael's such a good intentional friend that he called like so many times, like, stop calling.
And he believes the best
He
about
believes the
everyone.
best in everybody, yes, which is a good quality to have. But sometimes you
For
be a
way
little more
longer
of a
than-
realist right now, Michael. Like, see it for what it is. But I remember he called another friend, and at least this friend had the courage to tell him no. He goes, hey, bud, I can't be your friend right now. I can't do ministry with you because you're connected to Benny. And there's too much controversy right now surrounding that. So I'm not going to be able to do anything with you in the future. And I remember Michael hanging up that call and it broke his little heart.
Sure.
And I remember thinking, like, again, I'm glad he was honest and just didn't dodge your call. I
Thankful for
appreciate that. But Michael was so heartbroken and he goes, is this what it's like, Jess? And I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what it's like. They're there one day when things are going great, and the moment things aren't, they run. And I feel like, Steph, if we could fix that in the church, like really love each other, that means in good moments and in bad moments, really loving one another, lifting each other up. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to publicly align with everybody. That's not what I'm saying. 'Cause there's certain times where you have to use wisdom.
Sure.
That's a whole nother topic. But that doesn't mean throwing them out. that doesn't mean forgetting about your commitment as a friend.
Right.
It doesn't mean not praying for them and being there to pick up a call when someone really just needs a friend.
Yes. Yes.
We don't have much longer, but I would just love you just to kind of close and just anything that the Lord's putting on your heart, Steph, to just help us in this area so we can be more intentional and more just committed to one another.
I love hearing you talk about anything. There's so much wisdom you have, Jess, and
thank you.
It's beautiful. It's fluent when you share your heart.
I've lived a lot of life.
Well, yeah, but the life in you is Jesus, and it's so clearly communicated. I think what comes to mind when I said that you wouldn't know the hatred, you wouldn't know about. You would know about it. It's the collective you. Yeah. It's not as upfront as anything you guys go through. It's not like that. But I think one of the biggest keys in all of this is if we can learn to celebrate each other,
to celebrate glad you said that.
What God is doing. It's kind of like Elizabeth and Mary, right?
Yeah.
Elizabeth is pregnant with sight. I mean, we can see, like, she's pregnant. She's been pregnant. Her miracle is fully, like, we can see it, right? It's coming to pass. And Mary comes with this seed, with the seed of Christ inside of her. We probably couldn't see. Yeah. Right?
Yes, I think about this scene a lot.
Yes. Yeah. But she believed. Yeah. And what did she do? She went to someone who was already very pregnant with their promise.
Yes.
Already very pregnant with what the Lord was doing in them. And she went and celebrated. And what happened, right? The Spirit testified to Spirit.
I love
and
that.
John leapt inside of Elizabeth. And I think that if we'd be so intentional to let the Holy Spirit do the work of the cross in us, let Jesus just give him everything so that we learn to celebrate. Instead of like seeking for ourselves this moment, seeking to become, we just be willing to make it a point every time I see the Lord do something in you or really through you or for you to only ever celebrate it.
And if you don't feel like celebrating, this is what Michael's always said.
Do it anyway.
Then do it anyways and do something that makes you actually be intentional with that celebration.
Put flesh on it.
Put
skin in the game.
We've been believing for our building for years. Everyone knows this. Thank God we now have that. It's being built. But for years, we were believing for land, a building, and it seemed like every friend we knew was like, guess what? I just got land and I got a building. And I remember you're like, I want to celebrate, but Lord, this isn't fair. And I remember Michael would go, let's send a check.
Yeah. Gratitude.
Yeah. Let's do something until our heart actually feels the thankfulness that our friend gets to have this brand new building and we're still contending for ours. And I remember we would always do that. And it's like, as soon as we would actually put action behind what we were saying, something would liberate in our hearts and we would actually start to celebrate. And I noticed when we would celebrate others, the Lord would then bless us. And it's a beautiful feeling when you really do celebrate. And again, if you don't feel it, then do it until you feel it. Do
no
something.
strings attached.
Exactly.
Just celebration. Worshiping the Lord for what he's doing anywhere and in anyone. Just because you're so glad he's moving. And then before you know it, like, out of nowhere, you'll be blessed beyond what you could have imagined.
And I've seen God do that every single time.
Same.
I've seen, and it's not always about, well, we got behind them, so now are they going to get behind us? Sometimes it's never like that. But if your heart is right, if you really are preferring one another like the Bible does teach us to do, then something is released when you get to bless somebody else and celebrate the victories in their life that you might feel you deserve. But none of us deserve anything, Steph.
Every day we need to return to the cross.
We do.
Every day.
But I loved that we got to talk about this. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is just raw kitchen table talk.
You might have to make your podcast an hour.
I might have to make it longer in the future. I feel like I could keep talking about this topic, but I do pray that everyone watching and listening will really, number one, fall in love with Jesus with all of their hearts and make him the source of everything. Because I think once you have that figured out, everything flows from that. And it just makes what we're talking about so easy. But
that life
really
was the light of all mankind.
Exactly. But to really love one another so we can actually model to the world what it looks like to be a Christian.
Yes.
So we can model to our children what it looks like to be a faithful friend.
Right.
How we can model to others what it looks like to be faithful in ministry. Because if we want to last, we're going to need one another.
Yes. Absolutely.
We need each other, Steph. We really do. The body needs each other right now. We shouldn't be at war with one another. We should be leaning in on each other and believing for one another and praying for one another.
Yeah.
That's what we need right now in this hour more than ever as the world's getting darker by the day.
It's so true.
But the devil would love to divide us.
Yes.
But I pray that God will bring everyone's heart together and that we can really be the kind of friend that Jesus modeled for us to be. Yeah.
Amen.
But with that, we'll say
Amen.
Goodbye. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks
See you
for
next
having
time. Love you, Steph.
Love you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Jessica Koulianos Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more resources at jessicakoulianos.com. You can also join us in person or online every Sunday at Jesus Image Church. For more information on Jesus School, local and nationwide events hosted by Jesus Image, and resources, visit us at jesusimage.tv.